organs and analogous organs, right? We started with. Okay, Arpit, how about a quick recap of the last class? Quickly. Are you there, Arpit? Am I audible, people?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes, sir.
I think I'm not audible to Arpit. He's unmute, but Arpit, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you. Okay, for the timing, let's go to Sahel. Sahel, how about you giving a quick recap?
Yes, sir. We studied about the comparative anatomy as evidence for evolution, where we started with the homologous organs. Here we studied about animals which have anatomical similarities in the cell structures, and we studied about them. And organs have anatomical structures but have adapted to perform different functions, are called homologous organs. And these organs adapt to different needs of the organisms. Examples are bones of the mammals like cheetah and humans. They're structurally different. And for the humans, the bones help us to stand erect, whereas for cheetah, they help to run faster.
Yeah, but they're structurally not different. They're structurally similar. That's homologous organs.
My bad.
Yes. Yeah.
They're similar.
They are
but
functionally different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we talked about the homologous organs are a result of divergent evolution. And then what is divergent evolution is organs evolve from a common ancestry and diverge into different forms to adapt their best in their environment. Then we talked about analogous organs, which are anatomically different structures but have evolved to perform similar functions.
Yes.
Yeah. Then we went through 4 examples, which are wings of the butterflies versus the bats and versus the birds and the bats. Here we understood that butterflies have no bones and no feathers, and birds have hollow bones plus feathers, and bats have bones and no feathers, but they have skin. But the common similarity is that all of them can fly in the air.
Yes, right. Their wings give them the ability to flight.
Right.
Ability of flight, yes.
And then we talked about the flippers of penguins, dolphins, and turtles. They're structurally different, but all of them help them to swim. The flippers of theirs help them to swim.
Yes. Yeah. Penguins are birds, dolphins are mammals, and turtles are reptiles.
All right. Yes. Then potato and sweet potato serve as food storage, but they are different. Potato is a stem and sweet potato is a root. Then we talked about analogous organs, that is, they provide evidence for convergent evolution. In convergent evolution, different organisms adapt to similar habitat conditions and develop structures accordingly.
Yes. Yeah, and the last, okay, I also, did I not tell you about the biochemical similarities of proteins and genes?
About to start that.
Oh, I think I just told you that in one, so we are not going to do this in detail because it's very, if I elaborate, it's going to take a whole class in itself, but just know that there are biochemical similarities of proteins and genes. I was giving an example that the gene, let's take an example of a conserved gene which works in across many species in animals. For example, let's talk about insulin, right? Insulin is one gene that's present in humans, it's present in chimps, and in rats, in mouse, in monkeys. So it's across rodents, not just, but across the mammals also. It's in multiple species, and in pigs, and it all works in the same way. You understand? There are slight differences. It's not like, that's why we are using the word similarities, because they are not exactly same. But the whole idea that one gene, one kind of gene or one kind of protein can be formed and can function across animals and species is another evidence that biochemically we are actually, our genes have evolved from a common ancestry. Okay. There are also many human specific genes, for that matter, that genes which are just specifically expressed in humans and not in any other animal. And those genes make us human because those we have acquired over time. Acquired means some mutations happened and the gene got changed, and that gene now just humans have. So that's what make humans and other animals are different. But today I'll start with this very important concept of natural selection. And has anyone have heard of this term, natural selection?
Yeah, it's
And
a
before,
term coined by Charles Darwin.
yes, and before that we also discussed in the last class, I remember towards the very end, about artificial selection, right? Where humans have been able to breed many different breeds of cats, dogs, and also some agricultural plants, crops, right? So how do you think we can bred selected plants and selected animals? What I have to do for that? Suppose I want to breed or grow a specific kind of dog. How will I do that? Any idea?
You
Crossbreeding.
artificially crossbreed, yeah.
Yeah, so what do we mean by artificially crossbreeding? Suppose I want a Chihuahua, small dogs or very small pocket cats that I was giving an example of, dwarf cats. What am I going to do? That dwarfness or that the character that I'm interested in must be because of a gene, right? Some gene or some mutation in normal genes, right? In that animal. Correct? You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I would like to continue that. I would like to select that particular gene or that particular mutation and propagate it. I don't want it to get lost in between or get changed during genetic recombination. So the breedings that I will set will ensure that this particular character goes into some of the offsprings. So it will not go in all the offsprings, right? Because sexual reproduction always leads to variations. Yes or no? For example, let's say there's a gene of this dwarfness, let's say, and that's because of that the cats are very small, 6 inches and not bigger than that. Then when I will cross them, the progenies may or may not have that in let's say recessive condition, but those who will have one or two, I will just take those two and then make them breed. You understand? Male and female. Are you understanding, people? So over time, I am artificially selecting a particular type of phenotype. So if humans do that on purpose, that's called artificial selection. If scientists do that in lab, that's called experimental evolution. And if it happens in nature in general, then it's known as natural selection. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yep. Okay. Now this, for natural selection, the evidence that comes before that, just write down a question that can come. What is artificial selection? Give an example. What is artificial selection? And give an example.
So we have to write this under the natural selection part.
No, it's just a separate question I'm telling. Probably like this can be asked in a 1 marker or 2 marker. So just know that. What is artificial selection, and give some examples. So you can write the process of artificially selecting a genotype or phenotype. The process of artificially selecting the genotype or phenotype of a particular plant or animal species, of a particular plant or animal species over generations by humans. Over generation by humans. Leads to
Can you repeat after animal species?
plant and animal species over multiple generations by human, which leads to creation of new breeds, which leads to the creation of new breeds. Is known as artificial selection. Examples are plants for agriculture like rice and wheat, corn or maize is the same thing. So plants for agriculture, rice, wheat, corn. Flowers during horticulture. You know horticulture? Plants, flowers.
Yes.
Different flowers have been different breeds. Like for rose, you know, rose has different breeds and varieties.
Yes, sir.
They're,
Different colors, basically.
yes, they are all not naturals. No, you will never find any beautiful pink, yellow, these kind of lavender roses in the white. They're all created. You know, even all
Yes.
are. Yes, tell me.
So the horticulture is for like fruit and vegetables, right?
Horticulture, yeah,
Is the
horticulture.
study.
Yes, horticulture is the study. Isn't it the study of flowers? Sorry, the culturing of flowers. What is the flowers called? Can someone confirm this term, please? Horticulture for me.
So because I
Those
have
who-
read that it is for fruits and vegetables, etc.
Okay, if you have read that, then probably.
But I'm not sure.
Okay, then be sure, no? What does horticulture means? Anyone?
It's like the culture of growing flowers.
Flowers, right? Was
Yeah.
last. Yeah, I was just thinking it should be flowers. So Arpit, it's flowers, not fruits. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So all these different flowers that you see, many of them are just artificially created breeds. And write down animals like dogs and cats. Many breeds of dogs and cats are a result of artificial breeding. Okay. Now let's come to natural selection.
This artificial
Yeah.
breeding for animals, isn't it wrong?
Yeah, I mean, wrong in the sense like if dogs and cats would have had cats and dogs rights like humans have human rights, then it's of course wrong. Like you're not allowed to even tweak a gene in a human baby or an embryo or even gametes without like consent. In gametes or in embryos you cannot do it. Even if the parents want, you cannot do it. That's unethical. So this CRISPR thing, I told you, I think we discussed this one, that 2 scientists from China got jailed for this, and it was a very severe punishment of 12 years because they edited the gene that causes obesity in an embryo, and the baby was born, and later on this was found, and there was a legal case and they were jailed. So, but for cats and dogs, the thing is, you know, animal rights are also there, but we are not torturing them. The rights goes for torturing. The rights goes for, you know, unnecessary, like killing for sport. But I think
So
breeding,
this is also unnecessary, right?
for that matter, we growing different kind of rice is also unnecessary for nature, right?
Oh, that is like humans require to eat rice, and if we like for example, we need more proteinaceous rice, so we grow rice like with more protein. That's necessary.
Yes,
But then
yes.
animals, breeding animals is not like necessary to, like if a person wants like a very good animal, you just can't breed it. It's wrong.
Yeah, but then someone can argue that if a person wants a loyal dog as a guard dog. So I told you that if
That's
you get,
wrong.
if you go and get, that's, I agree. Like as a species, we are taming other species, but we are also conserving them. But breeding is like we are not artificially doing anything to them. We are just selecting some species and some individuals from the species and allowing only them to reproduce. But they are reproducing under natural conditions. So it's not unnatural sex that we are promoting amongst animals. It's also not technological or editing, gene editing kind of thing that we are doing in animals. Those kind of things are, yes, unethical, I think.
But so this can cause
But
other mutations and it can make like problems, right? Like what if
yes, but I
comes?
think if humans were all so sane about future problems, then we would not have been in this puddle, right? For that matter, we are destroying habitats, right? We are making cities. Making cities at the cost of cutting forests is also unethical. So now when we are having these, we call it zoonotic diseases. So COVID is one zoonotic disease. Why it happened? Because we just restricted the habitats of bats and pangolins so much that these, when they come in contact, the viral load keeps on increasing over generation and generation. Bats can act as a reservoir for viruses. Thousands and thousands of viruses live in bats blood, but does not cause anything to the bat. Now that's very interesting. But when the spillover happens, when the bat comes in contact with human a lot, and that's happening because we are living in close connections with animals. So for that matter, the city which you live in must have been built on a forest. There must have been a forest there which got cut, or any other ecosystem, a forest or a desert or an arid area. But we built cities. Then we restricted some animals' environment, and then spillage of viruses and bacteria happen, and we got new diseases. Then to fight that new diseases, we start a new branch of science. We start investing money. We start doing research and find a cure. So all of this is unnecessary, right? Don't make cities, no problem at all. Be wanderers. But then till where you will go and draw a line that what's necessary and what not is very difficult in terms of when it comes, especially when it comes to animals. For that matter, mice are regularly sacrificed in labs, right?
But that's
And
kind of necessary because for humans we need to know what can, like for diseases we need to know a cure. So we try it on mice because
but we are the only one that's creating those diseases also in turns, right? So if you are saying that if there's a disease and you are killing mice to find a cure, that's ethical. But if you want to have a pet, or if you want to have a different breed of a dog, that's
because
unethical.
that is want, but this is need. Like for mice killing, that is requirement, and having a
So
breeded animal is a
so
want.
killing is a need, so it's ethical. But cross breeding, where we are neither killing, we are not doing any harm to the animal. We are just selecting two animals which are dwarf and reproduce, allowing them to reproduce. They are happily
But
reproducing, and
it's
their babies are,
possible. It's
yeah.
possible that it can harm the animal.
Uh, it's not harming the animal. That's why all these dogs, they are just different breeds. You understand? It's like a cat, which is a big cat, versus, just to give me 1 second. Yeah, they are my flatmates are. Yes. So it's like we are not causing any harm. They are not under any pain. They are not under any trauma. We are not restricting their genes so that they cannot metabolize. We are not torturing them. So the harm you're talking about, if there is some natural mutation that can happen even without if we don't breed them, you understand? So a cat gave birth to, let's say, 5 babies. Out of these we see that, oh, these 3 have very beautiful white fur, and I would like to have more cats with white fur. So I will take these 2 cats with white fur and just keep them together so that whenever they mate with each other. That we do with our pets, right? We take our pets to different other pet centers, like where people come and breed
Yes,
their
yes.
Yeah.
pets, right? So there we are not harming, we are just allowing them to mate with some specific features that the humans also do. When we get married, don't we look for a perfect match? I want someone who's blonde, I want someone, all that is unethical then. So when you look for a perfect match, I want a boy with, let's say, blonde hair, I want a girl with fair skin or something like that, or tall, dark and handsome man. So why are we looking for these characters? It's similarly, we are selecting for animals and we are allowing them to breed together. So their babies will have more chances because both are white fur. So their babies, most of them will be white fur. Due to recombination, some may have non-white fur, but again, we are increasing the babies with white fur. And then again, we'll continue doing that. So we are selecting one kind of characteristic, and that's called artificial selection. Nature does that already. So that's why it's not ethical. When nature does it, it's natural selection. When human does it or we do it in experiment, that's artificial selection. But this ethical issue is, it comes when we are torturing animal or giving an animal unnecessary pain, which we anyways are giving more for finding cure of diseases than to just make different breeds. Does the argument make sense to you, Fatima?
Yeah.
So it's a normal process. We are just facilitating one type of mating and not allowing the other type. That's all. Rest everything, the animal is well taken care of. People love their pets. They don't torture their pets like that. Okay.
Yes.
Anyways, but it was good that you brought up and we discussed. Cool. So about natural selection, the first evidence, the first kind of very concrete evidence which suggested that, see, nature can select certain characters and traits depending on what stressor the organism goes through. Now, when I say selection, it's not as direct as us. Artificial selection can be direct. You go and pick two organisms and allow them to mate. In nature, because nature is not something with, like, it's not a figure who can go and pick organisms from every forest. So the natural selection happens through elimination, the law of elimination. So how it happens is, let's say the stressor, for example, this example comes from England and it's known as industrial melanization of moths. You know what are moths, all of you?
Yes.
Yes.
They do look like butterflies, but they're not butterflies, okay? So moths, industrial, the word industrial means due to industrial revolution, something happened. And melanization comes from the word melanin. What does it mean? Melanization means pigmentation, right? The pigment
Yes, sir.
is being produced more. Now, what happened was, in the pre-industrial era, okay, when there was a pre-industrial era, when industries were not that much in the England, there were samples collected for this species in the 1850s. So 1850s, naturalists collected the samples of this moth, this one species of moth from that particular area in England. Now they realized that in the 1850s, these moths were mostly white colored. They had white colored wings, okay, like grayish white. So they were very light colored moths. Post-industrial era or industrial era, like when industries got set up and everything was being produced in big factories. Now these big factories, in the beginning when they were set up, they were not running on electricity or hydropower or nuclear power. You know what were they running on? What were the first trains, first kind of engines, and first kind of coal? Yes, they were running on coal.
Steam.
And coal or steam, and it causes a lot of, so to produce
Pollution.
steam you have to burn something and boil the water, right? Even to produce steam, the steam engine concept, where does the steam comes from? Water. And how do you make steam from water? By boiling the water. And what do you use at a large scale to boil that water? Coal, right? You burn coal, the coal heats up the water becomes steam, and that steam pressure is used to drive any motor or any machine. Okay, so post-industrial eras in the 1920s, when the sample of the same moth were collected from same geographical locations where this species live, they found that now these moths are dark colored. They have dark colored wings, most of them. It's not like in 1850s there was no moth with a dark colored wing. There
No, but
were
then the
there.
dark color moths took over because after
Sorry.
industrial, the dark color moths took over the white color moths.
Yes. So always in a population, things come from within the population. So there were few dark colored moths already existing. It may be because of mutation, it may be because of overexpression of the melanin of in the gene, it may be because there are two copies of the gene in some species by mistake during DNA replication, but somehow there were dark colored moths. Now in the pre-industrial era, white colored moths flourished. Can you tell me why? Can you think of an eye? So they used to flourish, and dark colored moths used to they were not flourishing that much, because these moths have predators which are birds. And in the pre-industrial era, the bark of the trees were light colored. Okay, in the post-industrial era, and by the 1920s, naturalists also observed that, wait a minute, it's not just the moth's color that is changing, it's also the tree barks that are getting darker and darker. You know, if you see a eucalyptus tree in a very polluted city, you know eucalyptus, everyone? In Hindi it's called
Yes, sir.
safeda ka paudha, safeda ka ped. It's called safeda because the bark is very whitish, it looks very white. So, and if you see that in rural areas where there is no pollution or very less pollution versus a very polluted city, you will see the difference in the tone. But nowadays, because there is a limit to industrialization, and industries has to be set at the boundaries of the city, not in the main residential areas, all these things. Plus, we are not heavily relying on coal, but still we are relying on coal to a great extent. But when this shift happened from pre to post industrial era, the barks of the trees started getting darker and darker, because the soot is unburnt or partially burnt carbon.
Yes, sir. It's dark colored.
Yes. So if any one of you wants to see what is a soot, take a mirror, okay, a mirror that you can spare, or you can take a glass piece, any glass piece, light a candle, and just move your glass piece over the flame, a little over, like don't touch the flame, slightly over the flame. Some unburnt or partially burnt carbon particles always are present in every flame, and those flames will get accumulated. Okay, in earlier days, I remember, so we put kajal in the eyes. You understand, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Surma, kajal. So my dadi used to make kajal from diya, that lamp, small lamp with oil in it. So it will burn, and she will just collect all the soot and then put some oil and make it like a kajal, so that you can put in the eyes. So that is pure soot. So that started getting deposited on the bark, and now on a light colored bark, a light colored moth can easily camouflage. Am I correct? So birds will have a hard time finding a light colored moth sitting on a light colored bark. But when the barks got darker, now naturally, in nature, the dark colored moths got an advantage. They started getting selected. You understand? That is how natural selection works, because they had some characters which were different, well suited for this changed environment. So when environment changed, the moths which had dark colored, now they can camouflage better in a dark colored bark of the tree, and birds were easily pecking on white colored moths. So the population shift started happening. You understood, everyone? And in 70 to 80 years, it was very much evident, and this was this reverse in the proportion of white colored moths and dark colored moths gave a promising evidence of natural selection happening in evolution. Everyone clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sir.
Yeah. So write down industrial melanization of moth is an evidence of natural selection. Is an evidence of natural selection collected from England or observed in England. You can write down it was observed that before industrialization in the 1850s, collection of moths showed higher proportion of white-winged moths. Higher proportions of white-winged moths. Because they could easily camouflage in the light colored bark of the trees. In the light colored barks of the trees. This proportion was found to be reversed. This proportion was found to be reversed in the 1920s. In the 1920s. In the bracket, write down post-industrialization, where a higher proportion of dark winged moths or dark colored moths was found.
Higher
proportion of dark colored moths were found. Now write down explanation for this observation. Now this you have to write, all of you. Did you understood the explanation? Can you write the explanation in your own words? Fatima, Sahel, Arpit,
Yeah.
Matthew. Don't make it too long unnecessarily. Just use crystal clear to the point sentences. But every one of you understood the explanation? Or you want me to repeat the explanation?
Can you say it once more?
Yeah. So before industrialization, the tree barks used to be light in color. Now, no one of you asked why did all the tree barks were light in color?
Because pollution was less.
Yes, that's one. And when pollution is less, another thing that happened
The
is
tree barks were not dark color, they were rather light in color. So the white colored winged moths were easily camouflaged.
yes, but my question is just because pollution was not there, the trees could not be white, right?
The dust
Have you-
did not
Yeah, it
settle
was
on the
lighter
trees.
color.
But there are naturally brown trees also. When you go to mountains where there is no pollution at all, do you see all the trees are white in color?
No.
So no one thought of that. There are
They
natural trees
evolved.
also.
They evolved to brown color.
All of a sudden, no. So 1856, in 1856, you believe that all the trees were white colored, then now they become brown colored. So see, every tree, whether whatever its color is, in an unpolluted environment, it will have a lighter shade than in a polluted environment. That's true. Even if it's brown, it will be lighter brown and then darker brown in polluted environments. That's true. That was one factor contributing. The other thing is there are many light colored lichens. You know lichens?
Yes, sir.
What is a lichen?
It's a
Li.
symbiotic.
Yes, perfect. You have studied it in your junior classes. So please tell me what is lichen. Lichen is a symbiotic relationship between an algae and a fungi.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So lichen is a symbiotic relationship. You all know what is a symbiotic relationship
Yes.
Yes, sir.
between algae and fungi. So they grow, and lichen are a great indicator of pollution. If you find lichen somewhere, you don't have to do a pollution test or a AQI test. You just know that the air is not polluted here. Lichens can only grow in an unpolluted environment.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
like environmental indicators, right? Pretty sure.
Yes, they are environment, they are natural indicators of pollution. That's what I'm writing here. They are great indicators of pollution. Instead of the word great, let's natural. We don't know if they are great or not. Natural indicator of pollution. Okay, so they don't indicate the presence of pollution, they indicate the absence of it. So if any area is polluted, you will never find lichens growing in cities like Delhi, Mumbai. Mumbai you probably can, because Mumbai has sea, and the one benefit of being a city that is on sea is that sea breeze takes all the air pollution with it. Delhi is like kind of a Delhi, Beijing, Shanghai, and I don't know what's the status of other cities, but those which are landlocked cities and highly polluted, you will not find lichen growing there. So lichen growing on the trees was also one reason that they were light in color. Okay. Absence of soot and the growing of lichen made the tree barks lighter. So white colored or white winged moths or light colored moths could easily survive and camouflage. It was difficult for predatory birds to pick them. They mostly used to pick the dark winged moths. So dark winged moths population started declining and the white moths population started increasing. So if you collect a sample from the area, you will find that majority of it is white winged moths. But when post-industrial era happened in the 1920s, first pollution level went up. Because of that, lichens died. So the bark is not lighter because of their presence, and also soot deposited, so it is even darker. So dark winged moths got an advantage. So they got selected by nature and their predation decreased, and white moths were now being predated more by the predatory birds because it was easier to spot a white moth in a contrasting dark background. So a 180-degree turn, shift, reversal in this proportion happened. Is it clear, Fatima?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you'll write all of you will write the explanation yourself about industrial melanization. Okay, that's a homework. Cool. Say so no? Cool.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Now, another example of natural selection comes directly from Darwin. Okay, and it's known as, we study it as adaptive radiation in evolution. Adaptive radiation. This is another beautiful example of evolution happening. But for this, someone had to be as meticulous and a keen observer like Darwin to figure out, oh, this is actually not the act of special creation, but something that's happening right in front of our eyes. So adaptive radiations is very well studied in evolution through Darwin's finches. You have heard this word, Darwin's finches, before?
Yeah,
Yeah. What are finches?
there are birds.
Yeah, they're small birds which Darwin observed in the Galapagos Island. So Galapagos is a series of islands in the Caribbean, which are separated from each other by the ocean, and these different islands have very different conditions sometimes. So the kind of organisms that live on these islands, or even if there is a big island at different corners of this island, is very different. Okay, so Galapagos is known as the evolutionary lab of nature. So like if we have to do an evolutionary experiment in lab, what we will do? We will take two large populations and we will keep them under different conditions, right? Yes or no?
Yeah.
In fact, this is what one of the labs at my university is doing. And it just happened to be that today was the day I was presenting some work from this lab, because I was working with this lab, and the lab works on experimental evolution only. So if in the lab, if you want to do it, you need large populations of your model organism, and you have to keep them at different conditions. Now these conditions could be anything: temperature, whatever you are studying in that organism. It could be nutrition, different kind of food, different kind of temperature, different kind of humidity, anything. And then you see how these two populations evolve over generations. So you will, for experimental evolution studies, you would like to take an organism which has a very short lifespan, so that as soon as you can study as many generations as you need, because these changes does not happen in just 1 or 2 generations. Now Darwin, so we take two large samples of organisms and keep them under different conditions. Now these different conditions were provided in this Galapagos Island series. So if you take this whole island together, it is like a laboratory of nature. You understand what I'm trying to say? So if you take two populations large enough of the same species and put them on these different islands, they are behaving as like we are doing experiment on it. So nature is doing experiment on them by testing them with different conditions and pushing them to evolve accordingly if they want to survive. Those who will adapt will survive. Those who will not adapt will die. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So Darwin finches of Galapagos Island. Now, what did Darwin observed was, he observed that there are multiple uh, small black birds which are called finches. He realized that in the same island there are many varieties of finches. Now that's quite interesting, right? Why will you have different varieties of the same bird on the same island? How can it happen? So it must not have happened here only at the now I am finding it at the same place because they can fly and come and I can see all of them. But under the same conditions, this is not possible, right? Why will it happen? And if you think from a creator's perspective, the creator is not that free, if there is one, that the creator is just making small changes in the beak of a bird, of the same bird, and then just, it's like us, we humans are doing that. You understand? We are taking a white fur cat and mating it with a white fur cat because we want a white fur cat. You understand what I'm trying to say? Nature is not doing, nature is not just doing it for leisure and fun like us, right, Fatima?
Yeah.
Nature has a purpose, right? A purpose like which is not for the organism but for the broader context of the nature itself. So he argued, or he first proposed, that he studied all of them. He also collected samples. By collecting samples means he actually hunted these birds, 1 or 2 species from each variety, and studied the anatomy, studied the physiology, and he figured out that between these birds, the difference is just in their beak, the shape of their beak. Of course, there were some other differences as well in body size and other thing, but basically, it's the beak. And he realized, all of you have NCRT.
Yes. Sir.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me, there's a figure of Darwin Finch's beaks in your NCRT? I'll try to pull it out for you. Can you tell me which page it is on?
133.
133. Okay. See. Okay. Yes, I found it. Very well. Let's come back. Yes, can you all see this image that I'm inserting? Everyone, can you see this?
Yes, sir.
Let me make it a little bigger. Yes. So see here, you observed that they are all finches, but if you see their beak, so this finch has a very broad beak, also very long in length, and also in breadth, it's very, very wide. Versus this finch, you see very tiny and pointy beak, right? Now, he wanted to figure out why. What is this? What's happening? So he realized that this beak, this bird, is basically the main species from which other species have just like radiated. So this eats seeds. So this is seed eating. To eat seeds, so he started observing these birds. Like he had all the time in the world for science and nature, so he started observing these birds and he saw that birds with this kind of beak always peck on seeds, and they go and live in areas where seeds are in majority. So their diet primarily and majorly is just seeds, because it's obvious that seed is a hard structure, right? And you need to break seeds to get nutrition. You cannot just take seeds, and if you take seed of any plant and just without breaking it just swallow it, you're not going to get nutrition from that. You understand? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you need to break the seed, and to break the seed, you need to generate force from the beak, and your beak has to be broader and stronger. Versus this one. So these small beaks, and if these beaks are like tiny like this, so this is for nectar. So these birds feed on nectar, and if they're feeding on nectar from flower, they will also be smaller in size as compared to the seed eating ones. And then there will be intermediate birds which will be insectivorous. So they will only feed on insects. So he realized that it's the feeding habit that uh, and these feeding habits were shaped by availability of resources on different islands. So because of the availability of different kind of food on different islands, and they had to survive, so they adapted accordingly. These finches develop different beaks over time. Now, how can they develop? Now, again, use your logic and tell me the logic of moths. Do you really think that uh, uh, this broader beak finch over time, because it only is getting nectar, its beak will start reducing? So this is not how evolution works. So what's happening? How do a seed eating bird become a nectar eating bird? If you can answer this, you understood evolution. Anyone? So this is very important. When I say things, do not take it just like what when NCERT states things, do not take it due to the face value of me being your teacher. Question, argue. Does it make sense? Doesn't it look like doctrine of desire given by Lamarck, which Darwin only criticized and rejected? Then now Darwin is only saying that they had broader beak, and just because they started eating feeding on nectar and insects, their beak became smaller. Can you find some similarities, people?
Yes, sir. There is like similarities. Only the difference is basically the size of the beak.
Also, one difference is over the time all giraffes had longer necks. So the
Yeah.
shorter ones died. They did not survive in nature. Here, even the bigger beaks are surviving, the smaller are surviving, all sorts of beaks are surviving together. You understand?
Yes, I understood that.
That's the difference. But still Darwin argues that they have all radiated. That's why we call it adaptive radiation. They are adapting to different environments, and radiation means from any point source, when anything goes out, that's called radiation. Yes or no? This is radiation. So this point is one population. Let's say this is the seed eating population. Now they started becoming nectar eating, insect eating, any other thing, etc., etc., etc. That's called adaptive radiation. They are going in all different directions, but all of them are surviving. Not like the Lamarck's giraffe theory that there are no smaller necked giraffe left because all of them converted into longer necked giraffes. That was rejected. So how do you think this is happening? Is it happening in the same organism? Let's say this bird. Let's name it Alpha. So this bird, Alpha, was a seed-eating bird. Now you keep Alpha in an environment where only nectar is available. तो भाई खाना है तो खाओ वरना मर जाओ is the situation. So all of a sudden, Alpha now has to choose between seed and nectar. Nectar is majorly available. Seed is not available. So what do you think? Alpha will just think and will go and polish its own beak and make it smaller to have nectar? What is happening? How are the beaks getting smaller? That's what I'm asking. If you can answer this.
Over a long time.
But Alpha has just a lifespan. No, how long you're talking about? This is a bird. Probably a finches can live for, I don't know, but let's say it lives for 10 years. So in 10 years, can Alpha's beak be smaller?
So
Then how is that happening? Okay, write down this question. We'll start tomorrow with the same question. Okay, and tomorrow the class will start at the normal time. Today it started half an hour late, right? Tomorrow it will start at the normal time, and Matthew, I'll try to figure out solution before that. Okay, don't worry. But write down the
Okay,
question.
sure, thank you.
I want all of you to find whatever you can, internet, books, whatever your NCERT. Probably NCERT will not give a very clear answer, but you have to tell me tomorrow, Alpha, which is a seed-eating bird with a very broad and bigger beak, how did it managed? How did the smaller nectar-feeding, thin-beaked birds can radiate from Alpha? How is it happening? Okay. So we'll start with this answer tomorrow. Is it clear,
Just a second,
Fatima?
can you say the question
Can you
one more
repeat the
time?
question?
The question is, how are different shapes and sizes of beaks arising